we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. Thanks for joining us this week. If it's your first time listening, welcome. If not, welcome back. If you've never heard the spiel, I always like to say, if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Check it out. Make sure you know when we have all of our videos. Hit that bell. And like I said, drop a comment if you'd like. If you want to hit us up on requesting a topic, like today's episode, shout out to my boy Colin Gregory. This one's for you, brother. Let us know. We'll fucking do it. Just like my boy Mike Norman too. I get lots of requests from everybody, and please let me know, and we'll get to it. I love doing these topic episodes too. And then if you want to come on as a guest, my boy Home Devo, we're gonna get you on soon. Let's link it up and get it going, and we'll get some more guests on too. I was just thinking today, I'm like, oh man, I'd like to talk to some people now that things are opening up a little bit. Again, hit us up on our Twitter, on our Instagram at the Bigmark Pod, at the Bigmark Podcast for any of that stuff. And if you want to support the podcast, go check out our Patreon, patreon.com/the Bigmark Pod. There's different tiers there that you can support the podcast at, and keep it going. Keep these lights on over here, if you know what I mean. Like I said, this is another kind of request episode. It's very fitting, being that today is April 5th, the day of filming this anyway, April 5th, 2022. And that marks the 20th anniversary of Layne Staley, the lead singer of Alice in Chains' death. And that's who we're going to be talking about today, Alice in Chains. It's kind of funny. The last 3 episodes have been a little bit thematic, so to speak. They've all kind of been in the grunge genre. And, again, it's just kind of like the way it's kind of shaken out, funny enough. But, again, 20 years already. Like, that was April 5th, 2002. So 2002 is 20 years ago, people. Like, woo. So like I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the band Alice in Chains today. Super cool band. An American rock band from Seattle, Washington. So again, your Soundgardens, your Pearl Jams, your Nirvanas, Mudhoney, all these boys all came. That's the kind of grungy bands from all from Seattle, and it was just an amazing scene. Maybe I'll wait a couple weeks before doing that topic, but just really interesting again in the fact where so many bands were coming out of the same place at the same time, and it was a very supportive thing. They were really there was no like kind of competition. It was more so how can we kind of lift each other up, and each band had they were all considered grunge, but what was grunge really, it was heavy guitars and drums with really good kind of poppy melodies and awesome lyrics and really good singing, and just kind of put it together, right? So it was just kind of the evolution of where rock and classic rock and all that stuff was kind of heading. It just kind of went down this other pathway. And again, like your Pearl Jams and bands like that, kind of had those more thoughtful lyrics and things like that. Started kind of, the early days of getting into that kind of emo thing too, right? So it was a transitional period for sure in music. And it was also kind of, like I've mentioned before, right at the beginning of MTV. So a lot of these guys were really getting pushed in front of the camera, where years previous that none of that mattered. So they were kind of the first bands to come out and have to deal with that. Whereas any bands that came out later at least realized, oh wow, we have MTV to deal with. We got to kind of look good at least, or know how to act in front of a camera. Anyway, Alice in Chains was formed in 1987, originally by guitarist and vocalist Jerry Cantrell and their drummer Sean Kinney. So they were buddies, and they later recruited bassist Mike Starr and lead vocalist Layne Staley. Mike Starr was eventually replaced by Mike Inez on bass in 1993. The band got its name from Layne Staley's previous group. They were actually a glam metal band, funny enough, called Alice in Chains, like kind of like Guns N' Roses, like N in like the letter N instead of and. Was the original band. They were kind of thinking of, what's like a hard word and a soft word, right? Like Alice and Chains, right? Like a soft word and a hard word. And that's how they kind of came up with the name. And then when they kind of found their niche more in the grunge kind of thing, they wanted to get away from that kind of Guns N' Roses kind of thing and change the N to in. So Alice in Chains. Guess it doesn't, this is the funny thing with names, right? All they did was just change a word, and then all of a sudden people are thinking, oh, what does it mean? Blah, blah, blah. Really, they just changed it because it sounds cool. And again, they kind of were, Alice in Chains were kind of dominating more of that heavier side of grunge, Soundgarden, and Alice in Chains of the very popular, and Nirvana, of course. Again, it all had like a hard rock sound. But I think as far as like getting into almost the metal genre, Alice in Chains was really kind of on that side of the spectrum. It was really funny in doing some of my research for this. There's a really cool story that surrounds how they actually found their lead singer, Layne Staley. So originally Jerry Cantrell and Sean Kinney were at one of Layne Staley's shows, like with Alice in Chains, the glam rock kind of band, doing his thing. And Jerry really loved his voice, and he was like, I need him as a singer, but Layne wasn't totally interested. But they all lived in a rehearsal studio, and Layne kind of worked the front desk there too. Could you imagine living in a rehearsal studio as a young band? Amazing. And Jerry and Sean basically auditioned all these brutal singers so that Layne could hear them, and they kind of did it just to kind of coax him into joining the band, right? So the final nail in the coffin, so to speak, is one of the artists, or one of the lead singers, quote unquote, that they brought in to audition for the band was actually a male stripper, and he had the full garb on, complete spandex with handkerchiefs and stuff. And he was a terrible singer, and they auditioned with him, and I don't know if they were like, oh man, this guy's super good, we like him, but regardless, Layne overheard, and he came in, he said, listen, I'm sick of seeing you guys audition all these shitty singers, I'll do it. Hey, I get it. It's tough to find a good lead singer. So it was great that Layne finally joined, because it kind of gave the band basically one of their most distinctive features is the way that they do their vocals in the band. Very, very cool. If you've never really heard Alice in Chains, please go listen. Hopefully you have. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably have. But if not, go check them out. The way Jerry and Layne sing together, they do like really cool harmonies, and their vocals really kind of blend really, really nicely together, which is super cool, and kind of sets them apart. There's a lot of bands out there that have had like, kind of dual lead singers or multi guys in the band saying, it's not just the one lead singer. And I think that really gives a band some depth, and you can kind of go different places and have almost completely different sounding songs when you have a different lead singer, right? So really cool, just a really cool example of how to use vocals in the rock kind of context. Pretty cool. The band sold over 14 million records in the US and 30 million worldwide over their career. They released two number one albums, had 23 top 40 singles, had 11 Grammy nominations, and were ranked 34 on VH1's 100 Greatest Artists of Rock. But even with all the success, the band was plagued by their lead singer's substance abuse. This is a really tough, it's a tough aspect, a tough reality. I don't know how you want to say it in the music industry. And obviously, we talked about the death of Kurt Cobain and everything that surrounded that. And, take what you will from that podcast. Obviously Kurt had issues with substance abuse in the past, members of Pearl Jam. It's pretty hard to find bands out there, not that they don't exist, but it's pretty hard to find bands out there that haven't had some type of substance abuse problems. You know, Rush, God bless Rush. They're probably one of the only bands I can think of right off the top of my head where no one was really, maybe someone was into the booze potentially, but no one ever really was dealing with kind of hardcore substance abuse. But, and obviously there's other bands out there that haven't, but is it the tortured artist thing? Is it, you know, you have a little bit of money, now you can afford this kind of stuff, right? Like, because even in like the restaurant industry, there's a lot of like cocaine usage and stuff because like you have to stay up late and you have all this shit and people are in the back of house like doing whatever they want because no one can see them anyway. And you know, it's and that's like semi rock and roll, right? If it's Anthony Bourdain, that's fully rock and roll, and he was down with the H2. So it's really interesting, specifically heroin, I guess, but any kind of hardcore drug is really kind of associated with music in that sense. You know, even jazz musicians back in the day were doing a lot of heroin and stuff like that. And, you know, it's a drug that, I mean, I haven't done heroin, but I've done morphine. I had it after shoulder surgeries and stuff, and you get it and the nurses give it to you. And it's like, you're just like in a nice little warm heaven. You know, you're not really feeling anything at all, which is good when you have shoulder surgery, but you know, it's tough to say. You know, there's guys out there like Dr. Mike Hart, who is an advocate for doing heroin every once in a while because it does make it's euphoric. It's interesting. We talked about, you know, depriving yourself of things, and it's like if you all you have to do is inject this substance in your blood and you feel like you're in heaven, why is that necessarily bad? Is it because it's cheating? And you know, we get into that same talk that we did with surrounding steroids. You know, what are we like who's cheating what? You know, you're still a human. We make substances in our brain, and all of a sudden, just because we're taking a substance from somewhere else that is derived from a poppy, it's from a fucking flower. Yeah, there's a million steps in between. It's stepped on a million times, and there's gasoline and fucking whatever. But what's the difference with that and having a fucking cheeseburger that tastes amazing? You know, it's a question. It's, you know, something you got to kind of approach with an open mind. But obviously the true issue is that you do too much of it, you die. And you can get addicted to it, and it can ruin your life. And no matter how famous you are, if you're fucking Kurt Cobain, if you're Layne Staley, no matter what, those substances can follow you to your death. And, you know, that's the sad part. And, you know, in some of the research and some of the interviews or footage I saw of Layne Staley kind of being candid about his drug use, you know, he said one of the things that he actually likes the most about heroin is the danger that if, you know, he's kind of riding that line between life and death. And maybe that is part of our culture too, where we make it seem so awful that, you know, it just, as much as we want it to deter people from doing heroin, you know, saying that you could die and it's dangerous, some people are actually interested in that, or that's what actually gets them hooked on the substance, which is the danger, which is a really interesting thought. Yeah. Anyway, basically from about 1992 and on, Layne was really dealing with heavy heroin use, and his addictions were starting to kind of take hold. At times during the band's history, lots of shows were canceled. They had to move shows, postpone shows, cancel tours, stop opening. They were supposed to open for Metallica, I guess, on a tour. And it's actually kind of a brutal scene, and it just makes me hate fucking Metallica a little bit more. Sorry, everybody. Sorry, all the fans of Metallica out there. God bless. They have some good songs out there, but the guys seem like real dickheads. They fucking really put the gears to that new bass player after their bass player died. And then all of a sudden, when Layne Staley had to postpone or they had to quit the tour, there's a scene that I watched where they're all making fun of him. The drummer Lars, I guess, is in the back with a drumstick, like a needle sticking out of his arm. Like, come on, guys. The guy fucking eventually died from doing it. So, like, how do you feel now? Fucking cowardly lions. Anyway, sorry about that. God bless everybody. Everyone's cool. And people make mistakes, but yeah, like, obviously, the band were canceling shows mostly because they cared about Layne too. They weren't just doing this because he couldn't sing. Obviously, you got to do what you got to do, but they wanted him to get help. They wanted everything. And a lot of times other members of the band were struggling with their own addiction issues, but, him being the lead singer, it kind of took a lot of the brunt from the media or any of the scrutiny from kind of other people. And, Layne was always one of the first people to kind of tell others that were struggling with addiction that they got to get off this stuff and, got to be careful. And, it's a cautionary tale, but it's always hard to listen to someone who's clearly battling their own demons and also giving out advice. But again, who else would better know than someone that's gripped by addiction? Basically, so from 92 till about 96 or so, the band was sticking together, still putting out albums, but kind of very slowly over the years, Layne was taken over by the heroin. At times when people would see him, he was just looking ever more skeletal and losing teeth and had lesions all over himself and stuff. But he never really stepped fully away from the music. He was recording stuff remotely. Sorry, not virtually, because this is back in the day. But recording stuff remotely. And he did some vocals on a cover of another Brick in the Wall, Pink Floyd song, for a Cronenberg movie, I think, or some sci-fi movie. But really interesting to think, someone struggling that much with their addictions, he can still find a way to try and sing a little bit and try and do his thing. After a decade or so of battling his heroin addiction, Layne was found dead in his Seattle condo on April 19th, 2002. The autopsy showed that he died from a mix of cocaine and heroin, aka a speedball. Same thing that took Belushi, I think the same thing that took Chris Farley. The autopsy showed that he died on April 5th, 2002, 20 years ago today when this is being recorded. So he died obviously 2 weeks before his body was found. Mike Starr, the former bass player of Alice in Chains, was the last person to have seen Layne alive. Mike was actually high at the time on benzodiazepines and said he regretted not calling 911 after Staley warned it against him. So basically, Staley said, "Don't call 911, man." Like, I don't know if he's saying he wanted to kill himself, or he just didn't want to deal with the hassle, that he had everything under control. Like, don't worry about me, man. But I've been in a situation similar where you're worried about your friend and you don't want to leave. And, obviously, thankfully I wasn't on benzos, but I didn't leave and I ended up having to call someone to come and replace me. And, I hope it kept my buddy alive, at least at that time. And again, it's something where you hope you never have to do it, but when your friends get in trouble, you gotta be there for them. And again, it's something that Mike Starr regretted, for sure. So obviously it was tough. Layne Staley was 34 when he passed away. And the music industry was rocked, but it wasn't necessarily a big surprise. Obviously this was something that happened over years, and just heartbreaking, right? Like, just watching someone kind of slip through everyone's fingers. In 2008, though, the band did reform with William Duvall as their lead vocalist. They continue to tour and make albums to this day. They made 3 more albums. The last album they released in 2017 or 2018, just before the Pandy Wandy. And it's interesting. It's interesting to think about bands reforming, after a member dies. There's plenty of them. And there's plenty of bands that as soon as a member dies, they never play another tune together, right? You know, Zeppelin, obviously, after John Bonham died, was really hard. You know, they did some charity kind of stuff, but they were all intents and purposes done. You know, Yes, for instance, fucking broke into two bands and were both called Yes, and they just both ripped, and they're like, yeah, we all wrote these songs, just go for it, man. If you want to play with someone else, that's cool, but we all wrote this shit, so let's just share. And then again, you know, there's plenty of bands out there that have replaced lead singers, guitar players, drummers, bass, you name it, right? So it's tough, right? Like, you know, people who are living, they're still living. What do you do, right? Do you continue to play and it becomes now you're honoring the legacy of your friend who's passed away, or is respecting their legacy and not playing actually the way to go, right? So it's super interesting to kind of think about. But either way, you got to respect it. So good for the boys to continue on and do their thing. And I think, you know, the big kind of ideas that come out of today, you know, Alice in Chains is a tremendous band, really cool songs. Go check them out. You know, Them Bones was a staple on Guitar Hero, I remember back in the day, but just so many really, really interesting songs. But again, a band plagued by drug addiction, which is a whole other topic, but that whole tortured artist and, you know, trying to escape things, and, you know, people who have real pain, you know, will turn to substances, especially like heroin, that numb you out. And, you know, obviously drug addiction and mental health are you know, inextricably linked. And, you know, you look at people who do create really interesting, unique, really good art. You know, sometimes they do struggle with mental health issues, and then a lot of substance abuse. And is it part and parcel with their artistic ability? You know, how many artists out there wonder, you know, if I got healthy, would I still be able to make the great art that I make? Is that quote unquote health? Is my mental illness what actually makes me a good artist? You know, these are questions that anyone really asks themselves too, right? You know, even people who in social situations, you know, they're like, oh, I'm not going to be funny anymore. I'm not going to be, you know, a lot of comedians I know have dealt with that, right? Where, you know, maybe they're dealing with something that's serious, that needs serious medical help, but they go, am I still going to be funny? Am I still going to be that person on the pills or after the therapy or when I change or when I have to, you know, but again, there's the word right there, is change. You know, people are super afraid of it. It is terrifying. No one knows what you're going to be. No, but no one's the same. You know, after 7 years, each cell in your body has replicated into something new. Every part, 7 years. That's it. So you're a new person every 7 years. So to think that you don't change, right? You can't be neutral on a moving train, because things keep going, whether you like it or not. Whether you try to change and not changing, you know, classic Pearl Jam line, I change by not changing at all. And that's what a lot of people try to do, right? You know, they think, oh, I'm staying the same, but things move on, things move forward, people grow, people change, people do things that alter their course, their futures, their past, you know. But again, we can only live in the present. We can only move forward the way we want to. But it's impossible to control. So you got to go with it, and you got to go with the flow. You know, it's you do more damage by clinging onto the side of that branch and gripping so hard that, you know, you're white knuckling it through life. That raging torrent that's building and pushing on your back as you grip that branch, it will just carry you if you let go. It'll bring you down the hill. It'll bring you down, the river, and you're just gonna float, and things will make more sense. You know, as much as we try and plan, you know, things will always change. There'll always be something different down the river. So somewhere down that crazy river, as Robbie Robertson would say. I wish I had some Alice in Chains lines to fucking drop right now, but that's it in a nutshell. Thanks everyone for listening. If you ever want to reach out and let me know anything, please hit us up on our Instagram at the Bigmark Pod, at the Bigmark Podcast. Check out our Patreon, patreon.com/the Bigmark Pod. Like and subscribe. Tell your friends. Tell everyone you know. Please, we'll double the podcast overnight if everyone just goes out and tells one person about this podcast. I love you all. Can't wait to talk to you soon. Have a great one. Peace.